Have you ever poured your heart and soul into a project? You finish it, you step back, and the only thing you can see is that one tiny mistake? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into why that small error can feel like a catastrophic failure, and we'll trace it all the way back to a really deep primal fear. Let's get into it.
All right, so first up, let's just talk about what this actually looks like in real life. We're calling this section the perfectionist obsession.
So, does this sound familiar? You spend days, maybe even weeks on a project. It's 99.9% perfect, it's brilliant, but all your brain can focus on is that one tiny flaw. It's like your mind has a laser pointer for imperfections. This is such a classic sign of that perfectionist mindset.
And it could be anything, right? It could be a single misplaced comma in a huge report, or one image that's just a few pixels off in a big presentation. To literally anyone else, it's nothing. But to you?
The feeling is just so wrong. It's so overwhelming that the only logical next step feels like you have to scrap the whole thing and start over. I mean, deleting the entire draft. The emotional reaction is just completely out of scale with the actual mistake, and that's exactly what we're here to understand. So this obsession, it can show up in a bunch of different ways. It might be hunting for that one error in an otherwise perfect piece of work. Or maybe it's erasing a tiny pencil mark over and over again. But look at the thread that connects all of these. It's this deep, absolute belief that if this one little thing isn't perfect, the whole structure is going to come crumbling down. It just becomes this relentless, nagging chase for a standard that's, well, pretty much impossible to meet.
So why? Why this intense focus on perfection? Well, it's not random. It's actually a surprisingly clever strategy that our minds use to try and manage a sense of internal chaos. And to really get this, we've got to talk a little bit of biology. Let's talk about cortisol. This is your body's #1 stress hormone. When life starts to feel chaotic, unpredictable, or out of your control, your cortisol levels shoot up, and it basically puts your entire system on high alert.
And that feeling kicks off this really powerful, totally unconscious cycle. So first, life feels stressful. Cortisol goes up. Then, your brain, looking for a way out, hones in on a task, something, anything it can control and perfect. As you pour all your focus into that one thing, you create this little bubble of order, a tangible sense of control. And here's the magic trick. That action sends a signal back to your brain's alarm system that you're not helpless anymore. You're in charge. And that feeling of control literally tells your body to stand down, and it lowers your cortisol levels. It's basically a biological self-soothing loop. So, this is the key takeaway for this part. Perfectionism isn't actually the problem, it's the attempted solution. It's about desperately trying to build this small, safe island of order in the middle of a chaotic sea when everything else just feels completely out of your hands. But it's not just about what's going on inside our heads. Perfectionism is also about how we protect ourselves from the outside world. You can almost think of it as a kind of social armor.
Yeah, we literally use perfection as a shield. The unspoken logic is, if what I create is absolutely flawless, then I'm bulletproof. Right? No one can criticize me, no one can judge me, no one can find a flaw in what I've done.
In this quote right here, it just nails that internal logic. It might not be a thought you have in actual words, but the emotional math is crystal clear. If I'm perfect, no one can criticize me. And if no one can criticize me, then I am safe. And there's that word again, safe. It always comes back to safe.
There's actually a term for this in social psychology. It's called impression management. And let's be honest, we all do this to some extent. When you pick out an outfit for a job interview, or you carefully word a post on social media, you're trying to influence how other people see you. Perfectionism is just a really extreme, high-stakes version of that. It's trying to manage the impression of being completely and utterly flawless.
Okay, so we've talked about internal control, and we've talked about this external shield. But what's the real root of it all? Now we're going to go deeper. We're going to look at the childhood blueprint that so often kicks off this entire pattern. And here it is. At the very, very core of this intense drive, underneath the need for control, underneath the fear of judgment, lies the fear of abandonment. This is the big one. This is the primal fear that fuels the entire machine. Now, this isn't some vague, abstract idea. This fear often traces all the way back to our earliest experiences. It's where we learned, in one way or another, that being good or being perfect was what we had to do to earn love, to maintain connection, and to feel safe with the people we depended on. We learned that our performance was directly tied to our security. And so this deeply ingrained formula gets programmed into our subconscious. An error leads to failure, and failure leads to rejection, which ultimately feels like abandonment. And that's why a simple misplaced comma can trigger such an outsized existential sense of panic.
Okay, so with all of this in mind, let's try to reframe this whole thing. What if we stop looking at perfectionism as a character flaw and start seeing it for what it really is, a defense mechanism?
And this slide really lays out that big shift in perspective. On the one hand, you have the common view. The perfectionism is a flaw, that it means you're obsessive or you're being dramatic. But the real story is so much more compassionate. It's that perfectionism is a survival tool. It's a creative, adaptive strategy that we developed, usually when we were very young, just to feel safe in the world.
Here's another way to think about it, and I find this so powerful. Perfectionism is vulnerability turned into action. It's taking that deep, terrifying feeling of being vulnerable and unsafe and channeling it into something you feel like you can actually control.
So if you remember just one thing from our time together, please let it be this. The perfectionist intense, sometimes maddening effort, it's not about being difficult or dramatic. It is a profound act of self-soothing that's just disguised as productivity. It's a brave attempt to calm that primal fear we've been talking about.
And that brings us to our final thought. If any of this has resonated with you, I just want to leave you with this one question to ponder. What would change if you truly believed that good enough was always, always safe enough?